Hello, welcome to my garden. I'm Diana with the Fruit Grove, and it's the end of June, so I thought now would be a really good time to do a little update on my blueberry patch that I started last fall. I mean, I call it a patch, but it's really just 3 bushes. So I thought I'd update you on how the plants are doing and all the things that I've done to care for them this first season. So let's go take a look. Let me start by showing you where I've planted my blueberry bushes in my backyard. So over here on the very kind of front corner of my backyard, I've got my kitchen garden, this little fenced in area. You can see my grape arbor there. This is where I have all my vegetables and annual plants like that. And then if I swing around to the complete other side of my yard, gosh, everything looks nice now that I've mulched. But right here to the right of this big pine tree, this is where I've put my little patch of blueberries. So right off the bat, I want to point you to another video that I made where I first planted these blueberry bushes. I talk about a lot of different things, all the different blueberry varieties and how I selected the ones I decided to plant, plus how I prepped and amended the soil. I've got some planting tips in there for you, so if you haven't watched it, go check it out. But really, throughout this whole first year, this whole first season, the main goal has been to just establish the bushes as well as I can, make them as happy as possible, get their root systems going, with the goal that after these first few years, it'll take less work to keep them going because they're healthy and happy and well established in the ground. So let's take a little bit closer look. I'm down here by my plants now. This is Austin, one of my plants. The other two are Climax and Premier. And all 3 of these are rabbit eye blueberry varieties. There are a lot of different kinds of blueberries. You can reference the other video if you want the details. But generally, rabbit eye tend to do really well in hot, humid climates like mine. They go pretty big. They're gonna be 6 to 8 feet tall, really fill in this whole area. I've got mine planted relatively close, so they should kind of grow into a hedge over the years. But so far, the plants all look great. They grew really well this year. The only small issue I had was this spring. There was a little bit of rust on the leaves, and that was mostly because we had a really wet spring. And once that weather calmed down, I just trimmed the affected parts and the weather dried up, and I haven't had that problem since. So I'm really, really happy with that. One of the most important things when you're planting blueberries is soil pH. Blueberries need very, very acidic soil. Generally between about a pH of 4 and 6 to 6.5. Kind of the ideal range that you're going for is 4 to 6, but it can go a little bit beyond that. And if they don't have acidic enough soil, they're just not going to grow well, they're not going to fruit well, eventually they could die. So that's one of the biggest things when planting, and what I did here was amend my soil with some ingredients that were going to help lower the acidity. So things like Canadian peat moss and composted pine bark, and then I also used a soil acidifier, a sulfur-based product. And with all these things, you know, my goal was to bring the acidity of my soil down a little bit. Luckily, I've tested my soil before, and my natural soil acidity is pretty close. It's in the like close to 6.5 or just below. So I didn't have to amend it very far, but even so, I want to ensure the best environment possible for my little blueberry plants. So now what I need to do is another soil test to check the pH. I want to see, as those acidifying ingredients that I put in have broken down, I want to see where is the soil pH now, do I need to do anything further, and what my plan needs to be for the future. And I'm going to do that with a really simple soil test. So to do a pH test, all I have to do is fill this little vial up with soil to about this line, and then I have to add in one of these little green capsules and some distilled water, shake it up, let it settle, and then depending on what color it turns, that's going to tell me what the pH is. So So after I let the vials settle, I can tell going against the chart that it's probably somewhere between 6 and 6.5, just like I suspected. And so what that tells me is I'm good for now, but I'll probably need to reapply sulfur. I don't know, possibly every year to keep the acidity of the soil at that optimum level because I'm just borderline naturally. Luckily, my soil's not too alkaline, so if I am a little bit, off, it should be okay, but still, I want to do what I can to keep these plants as happy as possible. So that gets me to my next thing, which is, let's talk about mulch for a second, because I feel like this makes a really big difference, especially if you're in a really hot climate like me. Like y'all, it's so hot right now and it's evening, but we're getting already in late June these temperatures in the upper 90s and a heat index into the triple digits, and it's real hot. So first of all, in the fall, let's see if I've got some here. I raked up all my leaves and pine needles in the backyard, ran them over with a lawnmower, and used that as a mulch around these plants and around a lot of my other plants. And that worked fantastic. For one thing, because pine needles, there's some debate as to whether they actually will acidify your soil as they break down or not. Some people say they will. Other people, and some research says no, they neutralize as they break down. So I'm not sure. But either way, I figure it doesn't hurt. And I know that pine trees like acidic soil too. And I'm in the piney woods. I've got pine trees all around. So pine needles make great mulch. I've broken them down so they're in smaller pieces. But the good thing about that mulch is that it didn't compress over time, and it did a really good job insulating the soil. And it will break down over time. At the very least, it's going to add organic material to the soil, which blueberry plants love because it retains moisture and obviously keeps the soil healthy. But then in the spring, I always use this. This is composted pine bark mulch, and I love this stuff. You can even use it as a straight planting medium if you want. In fact, a lot of blueberry growers are using just straight composted aged pine bark like this to actually produce their blueberry crop. So this is awesome for blueberries, and it's generally not too expensive. So I use this as my mulch all throughout my garden because my sandy soil needs the extra organic material. And it works great because, again, this is a pretty acidic, I don't remember off the top of my head how acidic pine bark mulch is, but it's another acidic ingredient that's going to help my soil and help my blueberry plants. It insulates the soil really well. It keeps the moisture from evaporating. Whatever mulch you use, that's key for blueberry bushes because they have really shallow roots and they don't like to dry out. And so it's really crucial to keep the moisture as consistent as possible. And for me, with the weather being so hot, super important. So I've got a nice layer of mulch on here. Now you want to make sure and keep it away from the base of the plant because you don't want to bury the plant, like right at the crown of the plant, too deep. So I kind of occasionally have to come out and move the mulch around. But the mulch is a really helpful thing, I think, in keeping these plants happy. As far as watering goes, again, super important. Luckily, so far in the winter and spring, I didn't have to do much because we got a ton of rain, almost an excessive amount of rain, but it's good for the blueberry bushes. So I didn't really have to do much until the last few weeks when temperatures have risen and the rain has disappeared and it's been really dry. So at first I've done just some manual watering. A couple times a week, I would just come out with the hose, give it a good soak. You don't have to worry about watering crazy deep with blueberry bushes because, again, of those shallow roots. So, regularity is the most important thing. And now that the summer is starting to get going, I've got my drip irrigation set up. My setup is just a simple emitter tube that I've got attached to my sprinkler system. And these, I believe, are half-gallon per hour emitters, and I've got probably 3 or 4 emitters on each plant. So this year's a little bit of an experimental year for me to figure out how much I need to run the irrigation, how much water is going to keep these plants happy through the hotter months. And just one note about that, where I'm located, I'm kind of strategically placed in a spot that's going to get some late afternoon shade throughout the summer so that hopefully they're not going to get scorched and it's not going to dry out the soil too much. Blueberry bushes are thirsty. They need a lot of water. When these get to their full size, like I said, these rabbit eye blueberry bushes will be 6-8 feet tall. They're gonna need up to 8 gallons of water a day. I know because I asked my extension agent, the fruit specialist in my area. I wanted to know, and that's how much that farmers have to irrigate these bushes in the summer. Now that's the full size bush, so obviously they don't need that much now, but I'm always keeping that in mind of, you know, watering is really important. Not just the amount, but like I said, the regularity. So that is something I'm figuring out this season, and I'm gonna have to keep tweaking as they get bigger each year. As far as fertilizing goes, I haven't done any fertilizing so far. You know, I did amend the soil. I put good things in there, so hopefully that's gonna last as long as possible. I know that blueberry bushes, they can be sensitive to too much fertilizer. I'm anticipating fertilizing with an acid plant fertilizer in the early spring for sure. My soil underneath all this beautiful mulch is really sandy, and so I tend to have to fertilize my in-ground plants more than maybe other people might have to. But I'm, you know, less is more. I want to start on the side of as little as possible and then see if the plants need more throughout the season. So at the moment, my current plan is to wait until spring before I do the very first fertilizing. Since I've got the blueberries incorporated into my landscape, which was really the whole point, you know, I was pulling out ugly, half-dead boxwoods and replacing it with something that was going to be both beautiful and edible. So I'm using my big garden space wisely. But since they're in my landscape, now that I've got the bushes planted, they're doing well, I'm starting to think about how to beautify this area and how to incorporate some companion plants that are going to be beneficial. So let me just show you, I've just got a few things going right now. First of all, right here is my little patch of oregano. Generally, I love herbs as companion plants. Their strong smell can help repel pests, and I just like the idea of keeping edible things together. So this is my little stepstone path with some creeping oregano. And then over here, I've got a couple big marigolds. These aren't blooming yet. These were actually volunteers from a patch way over on the other side of my yard in my kitchen garden. These are orange Hawaii marigolds. They're big. They get 3-4 feet tall with huge, like fist-sized, bright orange blooms. So they look great in the landscape. So they are still growing and they look really happy. I've done nothing. They just showed up and I'm now so excited. I think I'm gonna plant more around. I've just got some hostas, and then here's some more herbs. I've got some rosemary and sage around. This is my persimmon tree right here. And then that little stick in the ground is going to be a hibiscus. So we'll see how that does. I just planted it recently as a bare root plant, so it's starting to wake up. So I'm excited to see how that grows. But I'm going to be adding some other things in this area as it goes, as I figure out what I want to have planted here. But that's just the little beginning of my little blueberry food forest. Okay, let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about fruit. And yes, I did get blueberries this year, which I was pretty pleased about considering the bushes are so small, and I got a decent amount. I decided to trim off most of the clusters of blueberries to try to help the plants establish better and get a better root system going so they weren't spending all their energy growing fruit this first year, but I did keep a few clusters. If you're curious to see kind of how that whole thing went, I have a video on that where I talk about whether or not to trim the fruit the first year that you're growing a fruit plant. But anyways, I kept some clusters because I wanted to see how they did. I wanted to taste them. And I am happy to report that I got to taste exactly 2 blueberries because that's all I could get to before the birds and or squirrels or whatever got to them. I did not bother netting the plants this year because they were so small, because I wasn't really concentrating on the fruit this year. But I gotta tell you, for one thing, the 2 berries I had were amazing. They tasted so good, and it makes me really, really excited for the next however many years of blueberry harvest. But I want to know, please let me know in the comments, how do you net your blueberry bushes? Because I'm going to be shopping and figuring that out for next year, and I want some recommendations. I want to know what has worked for you for birds and whatever other critters you're dealing with. Please help me out. But that's it. That's the update on my blueberry bushes. So far so good. They're doing great. I couldn't be happier. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.